Welcome to Into the Desert, where we discuss relevant issues with respect and without finger-pointing. I'm Larissa Munns.
I'm Elgin Hushbeck.
We're still getting started here, so please like and subscribe, and if you'd like to continue the conversation, or if you have any questions, please comment down below.
I believe the Bible, this is not only to be the Bible, I believe it to be inerrant. I believe this is the inerrant Word of God. That what God says is true when properly understood and interpreted. Now, when I'm talking to an atheist or to a skeptic, I never talk about inerrancy. It's completely a waste of time because it's something I cannot prove to them. Inerrancy is a statement of faith. It is a statement that I trust what God has said, and I trust God, and when I put all the pieces together, I believe His Word is inerrant, and I believe that this is His Word, and it is an inerrant Word. So, what does that get me? It means I trust it, but I'm not going to ever convince an atheist of that, because there's too many steps in there. What I do talk to atheists about is reliability. Reliability I can demonstrate. Right? Let's say for sake of again, I believe in the inerrant Word of God. I believe this is the Word of God. What if one of the gospel writers made a mistake about when, for example, one gospel it says 2 beggars were beside the road, and then another gospel writer said 1 beggar was beside the road, and one of the one that said there was one made a mistake and forgot that there was another beggar. By the way, there's a much better explanation for that, but let's just assume he made a mistake. Does that change what he said about the resurrection? Does that change what he said about Jesus? How many of you, let's exclude this book for a moment, how many of you have read another book that you believe to be inerrant without a single mistake in it? Nobody. I've certainly not written one. When I read my books, I just read, I'm currently going through Christianity and Secularism because we're converting it into an audiobook, and I'm going through it, my writing skills have improved over the years, so I'm doing that and, making it ready for script. I find some really embarrassing stuff in there. I can't believe that was in there. Not bad words, but incorrect words, things like that. Every book has a mistake in it. And one of the things I learned as a brand new author, right? My very first book, I get it back from the printers. I'm so excited. I'm starting to go through it, and what's the first thing I see is a mistake. I talked about a grisly discovery, but I didn't use the word grizzly in terms of terrible. I used the word grizzly instead of bear. Oh well, yeah. So no book is without error. Does that mean we don't believe anything we ever read? Of course not, right? So even if I believed, which I don't, but even if I believed there were some small errors in here, that's not going to change the reliability. And reliability is something I can demonstrate. And I do in my books. I mean, I go through all the various theories for the resurrection, right? The skeptics have come up with lots of possible theories for the resurrection. And there's only one theory that matches all the evidence. Some of the theories will explain the empty tomb. Some of the theories will explain the appearances afterwards. But only one theory explains both. And that's that Jesus rose from the dead. So if you put it onto a concept of experience, and you put it onto, okay, is this account reliable? Well, we have a lot of tests. Historians do. How when they go through a document, there's a famous document called the donation of Constantine, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And it donates certain lands. Constantine donates certain lands to the Catholic Church, and it was believed to be the basically a charter for them having all that land. Well, about 1,000 years later or whatever it was, some scholar was going through it and said, wait a minute, this thing is mentioning events that occurred after Constantine was alive. So how could Constantine have done this if it eventually, and so it's now recognized as a forgery. Right? There are lots of tests that scholars use when they get a document to see if this is a true document. When you take those same tests and apply them to the Bible, guess what? The Bible's very reliable. The Bible is super reliable. It passes all the tests, with the exception of one. And it is that same test. It fails the test of things mentioned in the future. But we as Christians have a very logical answer for that. For example, Isaiah mentions Cyrus, right? Cyrus wasn't alive when Isaiah was alive. How did Cyrus do that? The answer is easy. Cyrus didn't claim to be a government bureaucrat executing a donation for the emperor. He didn't claim to be a historian writing down what had happened. He claimed to be a prophet writing for God. And as a prophet writing for God, wouldn't you expect a prophet to predict the future occasionally? Yes. So of course we find things that are chronologically out of sequence, except when you read those sections, it's pretty darn clear the writer, in this case Isaiah, is writing prophecy, not history. And so, yeah, that is one test we will fail if you don't account for the fact that God is God and God knows the future. Now, if you start looking at the prophecies, then that actually comes back on our side again. Because, for example, in the book of Daniel, there's a whole large dispute as to when Daniel was written. And the main reason for the dispute is because it has a lot of prophecies that are just flat out too accurate. There's no possible way, from a secular point of view, there's no possible way that Daniel could have known all this stuff. The problem is that, one more thing. So the liberal scholars will date that at the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, about 165 BC.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Except Daniel's prophecies don't end there. Daniel's prophecies continue. And they continue to the fact that and if you do all the analysis and stuff, it comes out, but it comes down to the fact that Daniel also predicts that in the year thereabouts, the year 30 AD, the Messiah would come. The Messiah would have a ministry that lasted 3.5 years. Then the Messiah would be cut off or killed. After which the forces of Satan would come in, and the temple and the city of Jerusalem would be destroyed. Now, that was 190 years after even the liberal scholars say the book was written. And by the way, we already have copies in the Dead Sea Scrolls of the book at that time. So how could Daniel know that? How could Daniel, writing, I believe, 400, but let's just even assume the liberals are correct. They run 65 BC, right? How could the writer of Daniel know that in 30 AD, a Messiah figure would come, that the Messiah figure would have a ministry of 3.5 years, that the Messiah would be cut off or killed, and then following that, the temple and the city of Jerusalem would be destroyed? I think there's only one reason. Because whoever wrote Daniel knew the future because God told him the future. By the way, is there anybody about 30 AD who could kind of fit that description? Yeah. Sometimes, critics will, well, yeah, the Bible's accurate, sure, but it's so vague it could fit anything. What else could fit the Messiah coming, ruling 3.5 years, being cut off or killed, and then the city of Jerusalem and the temple being destroyed? What else is that something that if you could just slot that in any century? Do we have a Messiah figure every century? No. That is a very, very specific prophecy that could only mean one thing. And it can't be ascribed to some later person backfilling it. Because we have documents of Daniel that go back before Jesus. So even if someone corrupted the documents we have still mention the prophecy. So this is fact. And when you put it in terms of reliability, and instead of asking, having the atheist ask you to prove something that you can't prove, I can't prove this is inerrant. Because for it to be inerrant, I have to assume that there is a God. And the atheist is never going to grant that there's a God, so he can then say, accept my argument that this is, inerrant. So there's no way I can prove this is inerrant. But I can prove, within the norms of normal evidence and normal ways of looking at ancient documents, I can prove this is reliable. I can prove that Jesus Christ, the best explanation is Jesus Christ died on the cross, that he was buried, and that he rose 3 days later. Now, if you can come up with a national explanation for that, great. But I think you're going to be really hard pressed.
Thank you for listening to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe and put your comments below. Remember, be civil. We want to foster discussion and not division.